So let's talk a little bit about manufacturers. I'm going to be listing off a lot of manufacturers here. I'm going to throw them up on screen. So I'm going to speak first off to the no-name manufacturer. These are manufacturers that come out of either China, Pakistan, or India. And these are swords that won't have a maker's mark on them. They won't have any identifying information. They are mass produced very quickly and shipped off to the US to be sold. These are almost always decorative swords. They're almost always made of that stainless steel, and they're almost always extremely low in price. So if you can't identify a manufacturer, if a reseller doesn't have that information, be aware it's probably not a good sword. Probably avoid at all costs. Even ones that are handmade should have a maker's mark and have a name associated with it. For the SLO side of things, some very, very common manufacturers that you see is United Cutlery, and actually Bud K has some swords that they make. And there is also some higher end SLO in Marto. But again, I'm not going to speak a lot to these manufacturers. Be aware, 440 steel, avoid. But there are some named manufacturers out there that do the decorative swords. For the kind of stage steel level swords, there is actually a brand called Stage Steel, oddly enough. There's also Starfire swords. Starfire would probably lead you to believe that they make kind of fully functional swords, but really they're only good for stage steel. And there are a few other brands out there, but again, I'm not going to cover too much the stage quality swords, because I think it's important as a collector. You should really go after the fully functional swords, the ones that are well and truly properly made. So within the functional swords, you will of course have the low end swords. Manufacturers that tend to make swords kind of in that low end are Windlass, Hanway, Strongblade is one. And I would actually say Cold Steel tends to be on the low end in quality, not necessarily in price. And so their price range tends to nudge them up into saying that they're the medium range. But I think, based on the quality of their swords, I think they're actually kind of the more low end. So I think you're getting something about as good as you'd get from Hanway or Windlass when you're buying a cold steel sword. But you might be paying a little bit more for the name brand there. Certainly in medium, I would categorize Dark Sword Armory as being a medium level sword manufacturer. Their price range is usually reasonable, and their swords are really very good most of the time, and they're that kind of mid-range price. The high end are a lot of my favorite brands. You have Christian Fletcher, you have the Arms and Armor blades there within, you have Fable blades, is not so much a production style sword. Those are actually all handmade, but they're really high end. And you have, of course, Albion, which is one of my favorite in terms of production swords. They're going to always be very expensive, usually never below $800. But you can be guaranteed when you're buying a sword from one of those either production manufacturers or makers that you're getting a really, really good sword.